Thanks for staying on. It's still Breakfast Live on GTV, and this is the segment which we usually call The Scoop. Today we are focusing on IMF issues, and typically when countries turn to the IMF for support, there's usually some difficulty. We are told that 16 times we've gone to the IMF for support, and the data has shown that apart from 2018, when we recorded a growth of about 5.8%, the other times there's not been any significant improvement in our economic growth in terms of what we expected to gain after the exit of the program. Today, the government is sending a team to meet with another team from the IMF to ask for a bailout program, and those conversations will begin this morning. The IMF is the institution that everyone goes to when they face some difficulties. We know that government is going to make a pitch, and this morning Information Minister Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, who's also MP for Oppong, is at our table to answer some of our questions. Honourable Minister, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Thelma. Thanks for having me.
Been a while. I was just telling you, you haven't been on the show in almost a year, 4th August 2021.
That is true. That is true.
So it's good to have you back.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here.
I know that perhaps from about 10 a.m. it will be very packed for you. What's your itinerary like?
I have a 9:30 panel on fighting inflation, and then we have an 11 o'clock on the disbursement of some grants to tourism-related MSMEs with the president, and then later in the evening we'll get the first of the initial interactions with officials of the fund.
What do we expect from that meeting? For today's discussions, what will they focus on?
Usually the very first part of the discussion is on data sharing. Yes, they have a country office because Ghana has been a member of the IMF since 1957. And so they have an office in Ghana that's always looking at our, data. But now that you are formally engaging on the possibility of a balance of payment support program, they will need to sit with you and validate all the data that you are putting on the table. It is when the validation is done that we will know the form in which the program should come. Would it be a standby facility? Would it be an extended credit facility? Would it be a 3-year, 4-year program or whatnot? The data is what will determine the kind of program that we will get in the end. So at this stage, for the next 5 days, is the first part of the discussions, which is mostly data sharing between the officials of the finance ministry. The mission chief will report to the president and the task force later when they are almost done with this initial mission, but that's where we are. 16
times we've done this. We've found ourselves in a place where we needed help to bring ourselves from the brink of almost going into more serious economic crisis.
Yeah.
What's the guarantee that this 17th time it will work? Because if we haven't learnt lessons the 16 times we were there,
what shows we'll learn this time around? It's a very, very legitimate question. But why have we gone in the past 17 times, actually, and are actually probably going to go for an 18th program? The major reason for which Ghana has accessed fund programs in times past, the major reason is that the Ghanaian economy has its own challenges. And sometimes when crisis hits, the Ghanaian economy on its own struggles to respond to the crisis fully. There are times when that crisis is internally induced. There are times when that crisis is externally induced. So let me give you the last 3 times we went for a fund program. When the President Mills government went for a fund program somewhere around, I think, 2010, it was on the back of the global financial crisis. And Ghana had initially used a lot of her buffers to respond to the global financial crisis, which had led to financing constraints and high cost of borrowing. And so the Mills administration under Dr. Kwabena Duffuor at the time had to resort to an IMF-supported program to be able to respond when the buffers that we had internally ran out. When the administration went for an IMF balance of payment supported program, we argued there was no global crisis at the time. if you check the data, you struggle to point out what was a global crisis that occasioned it. It was more of an internally generated crisis, first starting from a fiscal management challenge, which then translated into issues of energy availability and the doomsday that came around that time. And then consequently, they had to, get some support.
And the fact that our debt to GDP as at May 2015 was 66%.
Internally induced. Now, today, if you look at 2017 to 2019, Ghana's economy was not perfect, but it was doing way better than it had been doing before. Earlier in your preamble, you mentioned that whenever we are on the fund program, we have very low levels of growth. That's correct. By 2016, growth was about 3.4, 3.5%. 2017, 2018, 2019, we succeeded in getting growth up, inflation down, interest rates down, and the economy was doing better. When we were hit in 2020 with the first crisis, COVID, we had to resort to a lot of the internal buffers and reserves that we had built to respond. By 2021, Ghana started rising again, growth of about 5.4%, inflation coming down again, interest rates stabilizing. And then in February, we were hit again with this external crisis, which is bringing a lot more hardship. Today, unions are calling for COLA. Everybody is having a feel of the global challenges that are hitting home locally. What happens often when these crises come up is that your reserves, particularly your forex reserves, are constrained, and your ability to therefore meet your obligations, particularly debt servicing obligations and other fiscal expenditure obligations, are limited. So when your limited reserves now stare you in the face and you are not getting access to the capital markets, then you have the fund to bail you out, quote unquote. The lasting solution, what would ensure that we don't go there an 18th or 19th time, rather, a 19th time, will be a number of things. Number one, we need better domestic resource mobilization. We're in a country where we only mobilize about 12% of GDP into the treasury. What that means is that all of us are working and making money in little parts of the country. Well, not all of us. A good number of us are working and making little monies in parts of the country. And ordinarily, 25% of that money should come to the central treasury. And when it comes, the treasury should have a very good fiscal management framework that ensures that it uses that money to serve all of us and therefore does not overborrow. Debt to GDP will not go out of the window. If we do not improve on domestic resource mobilization, successive governments will do a lot of borrowing to respond to all the demonstrations and all the calls around us. So one of the things that we need to do... But we've
always known this, that we can't keep borrowing when other governments would have to inherit and all of us would have to pay down the line.
The alternative is that we have to improve domestic resource mobilization. We ourselves have to pay more. We ourselves have to contribute a bit more. The GDP is happening. And whereas 25% of it should come to the treasury, only about 12% of it is coming. And every now and then, governments have this, battle with opposition and citizens on how to raise more revenue. We've had ours in the last 5-6 months on how to raise more revenue, which if we do, will not necessitate a scenario where you have to go for a bailout. That's one. Two, we primarily also have to ensure that we do more export than import, because when we say balance of payment support, what it means is that your balance of trade, because balance of payment comes out of balance of trade. It is when you export and you import and you balance, you net off. What will be left? If it's a surplus, a significant surplus, then you would have a lot of forex in your banking reserves. So as a country, we need to export a lot more than we are importing. Just yesterday, the Ghana Export Promotion Authority published a 2021 report that shows that nominal growth in Ghana's non-traditional exports was about 17%. And it had moved, I think, from about 4% the year before, which was a brilliant point. And we need to ensure that we do a lot more of that. Look at the things we import in this country, literally everything. Just this budget cycle, government put a policy, an economic policy item that says that let us take off the discounting of benchmark values, so that we can support local industry, produce a lot more, and not rely so much more on import. It was fought heavily, you recall, by Guta, and then they got political support, and then you got people who have interest in the import cycle. heavily.
Everyone wants a piece of government pie, and rightfully so, because resources have been entrusted to a team to manage, and everyone expects that something will come back to them. Considering everything that was said before about going to the IMF, and the finance minister, I remember vividly saying it meant that the consequences would be dire and we're a proud nation and all that. Was it difficult to arrive at this decision to sort of swallow pride, more or less, and admit that things are that bad? Was it difficult to even arrive at that decision?
I didn't get the sense that the decision was difficult for the president to make. The discussion, of course, will have people with various views. And you've heard those publicly who've said that, no, that's not the way to go. We can wait for the domestic measures to ramp up. And then there are those who will make the argument that, but while you are waiting for the domestic measures to ramp up, people are hurting, and you could go into a economic challenge, a full-blown economic challenge, if you don't find a way to get some buffers out there. So people, different advisors and different analysts made their case. But I didn't get the sense that the decision was difficult for the president to make. I get the impression that he would have wished that our domestic measures would have reached optimal level by now, but we are not there yet, and we cannot wait, and that decision has to be made. And the president went ahead to make that decision.
So if you were to make an honest assessment of how we got here, considering everything the minority has thrown at the government and all the accusations, the credit ratings from the agencies which government disagreed with, how would you say we landed ourselves in this place where we need urgently another program to sustain us?
First of all, this is an honest assessment. This honest assessment is the fact that there are a number of pillars that got us here. Predominant among those pillars, the fact that there's a global economic crisis. And that global economic crisis is putting a lot of people around the world in difficulty.
That would be COVID and the Russia and Ukraine.
Just yesterday I was reading that inflation in Turkey is now at 80%. 80% inflation in Turkey. That's not due to economic mismanagement in Turkey. Inflation in the US is now at a 40-year high. In the UK, 40-year high. In Norway, 13-year high.
And yet for in subsectors like, for example, tourism, hotel rates are more expensive in Ghana than in Turkey or the US.
But that is a function of what goes into the provision of that service and therefore how they are charging. But the point I'm making to you is that globally there's a crisis. This global crisis is pinching back home and is making life difficult for a lot of our people. At a time when our fiscal and monetary buffers have run out because of how we fought COVID-19 with it. When we were making a lot of those interventions available, well intended, but it came at a cost. The countries that chose not to make those interventions literally sat on their money.
But those costs were not left for Ghana alone to absorb. We got some support,
yes.
10 billion from Bank of Ghana, over almost 2 billion, some
and
would say, from IMF, and 430 million from the World Bank.
A lot of that support came as loans. That is why your debt to GDP ratio is gone up. That is why, partly, now when they look at your books, they will say, because of where your debt to GDP ratio is gone, we have to downgrade you. The downgrade was about two principal issues: where our fiscal position was, and secondly, what they call the negative governance outlook. If you read the report, essentially that's a nice way of calling the fights in Parliament. Two principal reasons for which we were downgraded. Now, for those two reasons, when you were downgraded, you don't have a lot of access to the capital markets, the international capital market. So that's why this year, for example, we haven't gone on a Eurobond roadshow. Once you don't do that, the reserves at the central bank, when you call on it, will begin to go down, especially when you are not exporting more than you are importing. So those reserves are going down. And when those reserves are going down, you may have all the confidence that I'm hoping that the domestic measures will raise more money for us so that we can respond to our obligations. But if you were president and you sit down and look at all of this, you would take the decision that start engaging with the fund so that you can get some support, some balance of payment support, some dollar to shore up the currency, to make liquidity available at the central bank to meet your international obligations and deal with some of the local issues that you may have.
Then I would ask, the IMF would always ask a critical question.
Yeah.
What are your own homegrown solutions? What do you intend to put on the table when you enter into these negotiations?
So maybe we should use it also as a point of education. We have the Ghanaian economy. product of economic policy. Economic policy comprising the various parts of the economy: housing, education, health, agric, industry, all of those are the policies in those areas, and the programs that churn out growth and jobs and incomes. Those are the policies that give birth to what you see as the economy. But underpinning economic policy are a number of pillars. One of the pillars is fiscal policy: income, expenditure, financing, debt management. Then you have monetary policy: exchange rate, inflation, currency. You have real sector policy, you have all of the other sub-policies that you may require. When you go for a fund program, it only supports you to deal with fiscal and monetary targets. So you get a bit of balance of payment support, which will go into, let's say, the monetary policy framework and support them, show up currency, you can meet your obligations. Part of it will translate into the fiscals. But there are many other things in the broader economy that you have to deal with. So first point is that what you are going for will not solve all your economic problems. So we need to be very also don't build a certain expectation that then the moment you go for a fund program, all your problems are solved. No, the fund program will only deal with about the first two pillars. It will help the monetary side, it will help the fiscal side. But you have other things in the Ghanaian economy that you have to do to ensure that the economy grows, expands, people get jobs, people get incomes, you begin to see a lot of development still going on, or as much development as you can. What the fund will ask you is that, particularly on your fiscal side, what are you going to do to ensure, basic, that you raise more revenue, tone down on some of your expenditures that they may consider as unnecessary, and therefore reduce your debt burden, translated from your financing needs? You as a country need to first put on the table some things that you are willing to do to raise revenue and to better manage expenditure. Already on the revenue side, I think government has taken a first move. We've got an electronic transactions levy. Conversations around it about, can we improve it, can we tighten some parts of it, can we plug the loopholes? That conversation.
The fact that some have suggested the targets are not being met because of a couple of reasons,
including the fact that we have bastardized it a lot. And I think we have to also have that conversation in this country that, listen, Thelma, we cannot run away from the gap between the Ghana we want and the Ghana we are paying for.
But if we have a budget deficit of 37 million and we were initially hoping to raise 7 million or 7 billion from the e-levy, which we will not now meet, we still have 30 billion which we still have to raise, and
we have to answer the question, how are we raising that? It is something we cannot run away from in this republic. There's a Ghana we want. We want a Ghana with roads, with electricity, with security that is working, with public services that are working, transportation, etc. Look at the traffic. We want solutions to all of those ones. We must pay for it.
So
if today all that we are paying, yes, they will attract.
But we have to admit to the IMF that we will cut some.
No, I'm saying
of our things.
I'm saying that there's a Ghana that you want. We all want a particular Ghana. But this is the Ghana that we are paying for. There's a gap between what we are paying for and what we want. That gap can only be met by us paying some more, or by a government borrowing as much as he can to try and close that gap. And I'm saying that even when you borrow, in the end you have to raise it and pay. So the bottom line, the first part of the conversation is revenue. I think that the revenue conversation is one of the most important conversations in any business, in any government, in any group. Here at the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, one of the most important conversations, as I've suggested to your board, is a revenue conversation. We want so many things around us here: new equipment, better delivery of some things here. Have that revenue conversation. How are we raising more revenue so that GBC can get its share? Not how are we just cutting expenditure. Because this first quarter and the second quarter, as we cut government expenses, already growth is beginning to suffer. When we start cutting all the expenses here at GBC, that we want to cut this, want to cut this, want to cut that, your growth here will suffer. You will not achieve the growth target, the employment target you are looking for, the income target for your staff. So it's not just about cutting expenses.
So you're
first
going
part
to the table
is revenue.
Not expecting to make the cuts.
That's not what I've said. I've said that before you start talking about the expenditure cuts, and let's not be overly fixated on expenditure cuts. Let's start off on the revenue side. We need to raise more revenue. 12% of GDP, with the greatest of respect, is not enough. We need to step that up. That's the first part. The IMF will be asking, how are you raising more revenue? That's the first question. How are you raising more revenue?
And so we give them the
well, we've got an e-levy on the table, yes. If there's room to have a conversation around that, we can improve it. There's also the property rates. Many of us are not paying adequate property rates. If you did a little audit here of your team and you said everybody, maybe just a joke, everybody should bring you the last property rates that they paid for this year. Thelma, you may find it interesting that all of us who are asking for something on the expenditure side are very often not contributing enough on the revenue side, even on property rates. So we need to have that. It is one of the conversations the fund will be having with us. We've got two answers already on the table: property rates. We've got the electronic transactions levy, for example. We've got the tax exemptions bill, which seeks to cut how much tax exemptions we are giving so that government can have more coming into the treasury to assist us. And hopefully, if we do better on these three items, we should be able to shore up the tax to GDP ratio. That's the first part. Then the second part is, what are you willing to cut? When it comes to that question, you've got to ask yourself, what are the things we are doing that are serving our people? What are the things we are doing that we can cut? Today, if you take the expenditure side, by the time you finish paying salaries of government workers, servicing debt obligations, and paying statutory payments, you are in excess of tax revenue. So what are you going to cut?
The economic management team that the Vice President promised us was very, very competent to handle the situation, should proffer us the solutions.
We have proffered the solutions on the revenue side.
Okay.
And those solutions, we have to work together to execute. You cannot force the people or squeeze the people so much. You put the solutions on the table, you engage with the people and make the case that, listen, we want roads in this part of the country. We want water in this part of the country. We want electricity. More people want public sector jobs. That's expenditure side. Mm-hmm. It's already constrained. The first thing we need to do is the revenue side.
And the team, you've offered the things on the table.
I am responding to your pushback that the economic management team should be proffering the answers. And I'm saying that those answers have been proffered. What is left now is our ability to collectively implement it. And it takes all of society to do that. You, the media, have to do your part to help us to mobilize some more revenue. Even opposition has to come to the recognition that, listen, you can do all the politics you want to do, but if we don't cure this problem, someday when you come to power, you will still not have revenues to deliver what you're looking for.
Haven't we always done that?
But that is what we have to move away from. That's what we have to move away from. That's what we have to move. That is the value of a democracy when it hits about, what, is it 30 years or something? That we don't keep saying that, oh, but we have always done that, so let's keep doing it. We'll keep running in circles if we do that. Now, on the expenditure side, there are a number of government flagship programs and expenditure items that everybody says, take a look at. And I have insisted, based on the instructions of the president, that it is fair to take a look at them. But as you take a look at them,
free SHS.
The
finance minister once documented to have suggested that he would have suggested a more targeted approach, considering the wage bill that came with financing the free SHS. He's saying that perhaps those who genuinely cannot afford should be allowed to benefit, and those who can should be allowed to pay. Is it something that you're willing to concede on as you enter into these?
We are at the beginning of the negotiations. I'll not be sitting here on television and putting our cards on the table here on national television. You obviously know that I won't do that. But I'm saying that, no, it's fine. You're doing your job. You're asking me. But I will also respectfully decline to put those answers on the table. What I would say is that I think it is fair to look at all of our expenditure lines, but we must also bear in mind that these expenditures mean a lot to a lot of people. Take Agenda 111. Somebody say, cut Agenda 111. My district does not have a district hospital. We are looking forward to Agenda 111 because my people die of malaria and basic
avoidable
diseases that should not be killing people. So for us, who did not have a medical doctor, one medical doctor, until I became member of parliament, the district hospital means a lot to us. So if you have a hospital in your area and you say that cut Agenda 111, we'll be very unhappy with you. If you are employed and you say cut NAPCO, when people were not paid or have not been paid for 6 or 7 months because of the fiscal situation, it portends a lot of difficulty for them because it's a lifeline for people. So even when you are talking about cuts, you have to take time and examine how those cuts,
non-essential.
Yes, how those cuts affect people. And I can assure you that we are very committed to doing that. We need to go through the process.
Will that commitment extend to the National Cathedral, for example? We are hearing that figure is flying around somewhere, and people ask, there's churches all over, do we need this at this time? Should government be putting attention and extra cash that we could be spending on the district hospital in Oppong on a national cathedral? It's National Cathedral Week. There's even a celebration of a National Cathedral Week.
So
do we need this now?
I have said, for example, that it is fair to examine all our expenditure lines. And as we go into this negotiation, take a decision on what can be cut without affecting the essentials and what we can do away with. And as I have said, I won't sit here on television, national television, and put our card on the table about even what we are going into this negotiation with. Nobody does that. But the people of Ghana, what I'll say in the end, can rest assured that in the end, how we will negotiate this will be in their best interest to protect what is most important to the people of Ghana while doing the necessary cuts and concessions that need to be made.
The finance minister gave us a plan, as you said, the economic management team that we were told to trust to take us through the woods. And he said that austerity measures were being rolled out to ensure that government cut its expenses. One of them was a moratorium on travel. Another was a cut in the salaries and
30%.
Other things belonging to members of the cabinet and national advisors to the president. How much did those austerity measures save us? And how are we using those to help us get to where we want to get to in our conversations with the IMF and beyond?
So on the second part of your question, when the finance minister appears before Parliament, I think on the 13th of July, to present the mid-year review, he will provide those hard numbers. On the first part of your question, yes, the principle was to ensure that we cut government expenses, but not take out that money to go and do something else. Leave it in the treasury so that it can fund other priorities of government. The economic management team that you talk about is the same economic management team that between 2017 and 2019 delivered all those results that sometimes people just want to gloss over. This is the team today. When inflation hits 27%, everybody is complaining because it is true. You go to the market to buy a bottle of cooking oil today, and by the time you go back tomorrow, the price has gone up. Because inflation is at 27%, because Russia and Ukraine are fighting, and therefore it is affecting fuel and transportation and the value-added cost of food items. But when the same economic management team brought down inflation from 15 to 7%, you realize that we wanted to wish it away that, oh, it's just numbers. Today, some of those numbers are beginning to show us that apparently some of the things we were doing in the beginning, when there was no crisis, were delivering results for us.
These were also times when we were still under the IMF program.
You have even made my point for me. You have even made my point for me. So under a fund program, and compare the fund program before 2017 and its results, growth of about 3.4, which you mentioned earlier, and the same fund program from 2017 to about 2019, when the MPP was handling the economy with the same economic management team you talk about, and see the results.
And yet,
that is when inflation came down. That is when inflation came down from about 15% to about 7%. That's when interest rates came down. That's when growth went up to about 7%. When growth is going up, it means the economy is expanding, and more people, not everybody, but more people are getting jobs. So just to respond to that first part of your question, this economic management team has the competencies to handle even the difficulties of today in the midst of the twin global crisis and get us to a point where we are back on growth, we are back at high levels of employment, bring inflation back down, bring interest rates back down, and most importantly, deliver on the development projects that I want in my constituency and you want in yours as well. You can trust this economic management team to do that.
What figures are you looking at? We are seeing our levels very, very dire. When we exit the program, because we don't know how long, since you say the negotiations haven't started.
It will take about 6 months to conclude a negotiation on the average. Programs vary. You could get between a year and 4 years. So the type of program you negotiate may be somewhere between a 1 year and a 4 year program. The last one we went for was, I think, it was a 3 year program that we went for the last time. Yes, that was a 3 year program. The ECF was a 3 year program. So it varies somewhere between 1 and 4 years.
And it's the amount of money we've had to go back to the IMF for help.
Yes, but it is also the period in which we've had 2 global crises. COVID hit you badly. It hit many many businesses around this country and around the world badly. Russia and Ukraine is affecting you. Today you buy fuel, I buy fuel today at crazy prices at the pump. Why? Because crude oil has moved from $74 per barrel in December to 133. These two crises.
We are an oil producing country that does not have
we are a net
an
importer.
Oil refinery,
we
take it out and bring it back in for more money.
We are a net importer of oil. That's the point. It's not about refining. It's important to deal with our refinery and refine the little we produce. But we are a net importer because in the end, how much you import, how much you consume for oil is way more than how much you produce, even if you were refining it. That's the bottom line. So we are a net importer. But the point I'm making is this. You've had to go back to the fund in the short time because two major global issues have hit us, and we can't run away from that.
So I come again to the question, what do we expect to get, what figures are we expecting? The growth target for 2022 to 2025 was about 5.8%.
Yeah.
And that's the medium to short term forecast.
Yeah.
Beyond the IMF program or during the IMF program, what figures are you expecting to see?
So, when I did the little descriptive about the economic policy and the pillars of economy, the IMF is only going to do with fiscal and monetary matters. They will not deal with real sector issues that translate into growth. Real sector issues that translate into growth have to be dealt with by the government of Ghana and the people of Ghana by ensuring that, on at least the expenditure side of the fiscal, you channel the little expenses you have into productive sectors, particularly industry, particularly entrepreneurship.
It brings me perfectly to the question of what happens to Ghana Beyond Aid.
Well, Ghana Beyond Aid is still relevant. What we are going to the fund for is not aid, it's a loan. So it doesn't change the principle of Ghana.
But
and the principle of Ghana,
do something, which is an aid.
No, it's not aid. Loan can never be aid.
But without
loan is
the
not
money
aid. No, loan is not aid.
Looking for.
Loan.
Okay.
We are going for a loan which will pay back. We have to mobilize our domestic resources, put it into the productive sectors, grow the economy. When the GDP comes, we have to pay a certain percentage of it to the Treasury, about 25% of it, so that we can service those debt obligations. The vision of Ghana Beyond Aid, and I know people like to mock it. Is it Ghana Beyond Aid? Why are you going for a loan? Aid is not loan. Loan is not aid. But Ghana Beyond Aid essentially says that we should get to that point where we are able to mobilize our own resources to do the things we are looking for and not rely on aid from other countries. And if you look at the aid component of our previous decades' budgets, it was very huge. They will tell you, for example, that the education and health budgets had a huge component coming from aid. So what Ghana Beyond Aid says is that we have to improve the mobilization of resources to take care of ourselves. And that principle has not gone away. In terms of what are we expecting as targets at the end, we're expecting to have an improved fiscal structure, i.e. some more inflows to be able to better attend to our expenditures, trim down on some of those expenses. On the currency side, you are expecting that you shore up and stabilize the cedi, and most importantly, you're able to meet your external debt obligations. But on the real sector side, we have to deepen collaboration, particularly with industry. Industry has its own ability of mobilizing its capital and having its know-how, but requires some more collaborative help from government. And we have to do better at that so that industry can expand and create more jobs, grow some more, make sure that more people get incomes and improve their quality of life. Just a couple of days ago, the president had a sit down with the trade minister and the head of GIPC. Why? Because we want to explore how to deepen that industry collaboration, even in spite of what you are doing on the fiscal and monetary side with the fund. So there's a lot more we have to do on the real sector side. And I say that we need to collaborate better to stimulate the private sector to ensure that growth does not suffer. And we did that between 2017 and 2019, despite the fund program. You alluded to it at the beginning of our conversation, that in previous fund programs, growth was low. Growth was low because many governments, when they are under a fund program, don't pay attention to deepening collaboration with the private sector so that growth can still be achieved. We did it in 2017 to 2019 under the economic management team that you mentioned. And it is one of the things that we'll look to do in this new window as well.
Honourable Minister, do you feel that you have the trust of the people? And I'm asking this because there are some who tell us from word on the streets that they feel disappointed considering it was the same government that chastised another government for taking us into a similar program. And now, after selling a message of competence and of discipline in the financial space, we are seeing the same government take us into an IMF program. And they did not want to hear the explanation of we had COVID and there was the Ukraine war.
You can't run away from the truth.
How do you address these issues?
So there are four key things: trust, taking us into a similar situation, competence, and there's a fourth one of they don't want to hear the explanations. You cannot run away from the truth. The truth is the truth. There's a reason for which about 100 countries around the world are asking the IMF for help. There's a reason for which when you tune to CNN and BBC and Sky News, everybody's talking about a cost of living crisis around the world. That's the truth. You can't run away from it. Apart from that, trust is an ongoing concern. You always have to work to engender trust. And sometimes, based on the peaks and troughs in a country's cycle, trust goes up, it comes down. I remember at the beginning of COVID, when government started putting out numbers of infected people, there was a lot of mistrust. We don't believe the numbers. It's not true. More people are dying and they are hiding it. You remember, I used to come here to your studios, on a weekly basis to try and answer some of the questions. There was very low trust. What we did was to come frontal, share the information regularly, keep repeating the truth, show the people that we are not hiding anything. And that these are the measures we have to take to protect ourselves. So trust sometimes goes up and comes down. But what you need to do is to consistently tell the people the truth, show them the numbers. And my experience is that the people will come along with you. The people of Ghana are suffering in the face of a global economic crisis. What we have to do is not to worry that they may not trust you. It's to engage with them regularly, frontally, to explain the issues to them, to take their feedback and to work with it. Competence. The mark of competence is what happens when there is a period of, let's say, 2017 to 2019, and you've put your measures on the table, even under a fund program. There's no global crisis, and the numbers are showing themselves forth. When 2020 hit us and the global economy literally went into recession, we went into recession, but our growth was very, very minimal. 2022, when there was no crisis, 5.4% growth. 2021, when there was no crisis, 2022, when there's an economic crisis, everybody around us is struggling. And we have had to ask for support. That is not incompetence. That is not a domestically induced challenge. I think the two are quite different. But instead of sometimes even going back and forth on these, what people want is, how is our burden going to be relieved moving forward? Our burden is going to be relieved moving forward by, first of all, taking off pressure on the fiscal and monetary side and paying some more attention to investing in the real sector of the economy. Agriculture, industry, services, infrastructure, and engaging better with the players in these areas to deliver relief to our people. Our people are looking forward to how do we ensure that food prices at least will stabilize if they won't come down. That's what people are interested in. People are interested in how to ensure that the conditionalities don't bite extensively. And I say to anybody who has worries that your worries may be legitimate, but the reality is that when the MPP administration had to negotiate a 1-year extension of the NDC's ECF, we managed to negotiate that and still kept the most important things to you. And we are looking forward to doing that one more time, even in these negotiations.
Wow, a flood of questions. I don't know how much longer you will take to
Let me respond to some of them. For example,
correct data. Are you going with the correct data?
Absolutely. There's an IMF office in town. They have access to our data. The mission is in town. Our team, the local office, the team from the mission will have the opportunity to go through all of that data.
When we are talking about cuts, we are talking, are there fears of salary cuts?
We have that data, which would help inform the conversation. Mm-hmm. There's a misconception out there that aid is a low. I think you should take advantage of it and bring some finance people to do some more education. If I'm running a business and I go and borrow money as working capital for my business and I work and I pay him back, that is not aid. Aid, especially within the context of what we've spoken about, is quite clear. And if you look at the aid contribution to Ghana's budget, education and health in times past, you get grants. You get a grant that says that take this money and do this, pay it back. That is aid. This is not aid. I think we have to be clear about that. Now, jobs,
there were a number of
jobs, for example.
About jobs.
Yes, jobs, for example, says, where are the jobs? So all of these last 2 years, even in the public sector, you've reported several times about tens of thousands of people lining up at LWAC and other places because the government had opened up an employment window in the security services and people were going there in search of jobs.
Was that an attempt to get a number of people in, so that when we go to IMF and it comes to the matter of do not employ, we would have said that
no,
we've taken this number of people in,
because the economy that could not recruit because of the previous IMF program before 2016 improved in 2017, 2019, so that government had more fiscal space to recruit. And that's why we were recruiting soldiers and police officers and nurses, etc. Did everybody get a job? I have never said so. But that was comparatively better to the time when you could not have people being recruited. That is evidence. I'm not saying it. You reported it, that jobs were being created. You may not like it, but that's the truth.
And others
another matter, when the economy grows or growth moves from 3.4 or 3.5 to 7%, that means there's more economic expansion. When there's economic expansion, people get jobs. Has everybody gotten a job? I haven't said so. But that scenario is relatively better compared to a scenario where the economy was growing at 3.4 or 3.5%. These are not my words. This is hard data here in this country that we're working from. Now, talking about salaries, the executive branch has cut salaries by 30%. And we have asked other branches of government to take a cue. The executive cannot cut MPs' salary. I think we have to educate the on these matters. The executive cannot cut MP salary. MP salaries are not determined by the executive. They are determined by a committee, a constitutional committee.
The suggestion is whatever the process is it time to
the executive
call in
has
that
done
clause?
The executive has done it. 30% cut in salaries. The Council of State has done it. They've also decided to take some cuts on their own. If the call out there is for MPs to do the same, I think it's a fair call. I have even gone on record earlier when the executive said we're going to do it as suggesting that should be done.
How much are we looking for to get from the IMF?
Let me just also speak to this claim that Russia and Ukraine has not affected our neighbors. It has affected our neighbors. It has affected our neighbors. We have to delve into the details a bit. Some of our neighbors use the French franc. The effect of that is that the currency support that they get is different from what you using your own CD
because in the
get.
past,
That's
others
one.
On your using CFA as a basis to say even the French-speaking countries are doing this and Ghana is not.
But that's the first point, that they operate a different currency. The second point is that there are countries like Nigeria which are net exporters of oil and therefore are able to subsidize fuel prices. And so you will find that fuel price in Nigeria will not be the same as in Ghana. You may make the argument that both of us produce oil, but we don't produce oil in the same quantities. They are net exporters, we are net importers. Somebody makes a joke that by even Ukraine and Russia are not taking facility from the IMF. Let's do some research and educate the public. Ukraine has received billions of dollars from the US, from the UK, from the EU to support their economy because of the war.
So they do not need to go to the IMF.
So the fact that they have not gone for that does not allow you to just throw it away that, oh, Ukraine has not gone for an so the war affected more than Ukraine. You know, sometimes we make light of some of these issues, but I think that we should, while we have a good sense of humor in Ghana, we should also take advantage and educate the public. Russia is a major net exporter of crude oil, of gas. And even in the midst of this war, you should see their balance of trade.
How much are we looking to get?
So that is the truth, and that is what we should be sharing with our people some more. Ghana needs about 3 to 3.5 billion. We've already got about $1 billion from the international capital markets in Parliament, which we are hoping to pass. Depending on how the data sharing and analysis go, we will then have a clarity of how much we can get from the fund. Apart from the capital markets and the fund, we will still have to raise domestic resources. We will still have to do better on our tax payment and move domestic resource mobilization from 12% to a higher number.
And did we need the IMF to police this?
To police what?
To police our cuts, our financial discipline. Did we need to do that?
First of all, we are not in a position, our position is not because of discipline. We've explained over, and there was a time when we had fiscal indiscipline, where on our own, without any global crisis, we spent monies in a way that led us to the fund.
So without keeping an eye on where the debt levels would take us to.
Today, That is not where we are. Today, we are in this situation because there's a global crisis that is eating up the reserves of many economies. And for those that don't have support, they are struggling and they have to go to the fund for support. The two scenarios are different, and we have to consistently repeat it and explain for our people to understand.
And people still do not get the point. And others are calling for heads to roll, including the head of the finance minister, feeling let down by the kind of perhaps advice that he have offered. What do you tell the people of Ghana who are asking for more, who are asking, teachers are asking?
Yes, cost of living allowance,
everyone
TUC
is asking
is
for
asking
something.
this morning, nurses and midwives are asking for cost of
What
living.
assurances are you giving the Ghanaian worker?
It's not about assurances, it's about looking at the scenario together. Go into your fiscals, income and expenditure. You are mobilizing only 12% of GDP. It only pays salaries of the existent workers, services, debts, and even on statutory payment, it struggles. Do you have fiscal space to give subsidies? Do you have fiscal space to spend more? You were asking me a question about expenditure cuts. How do you cut and still respond to some of these extra allowances? Those are the realities of the situation. That's why I started off by saying that we may not like some of these conversations, but the reality is that we have to go to the top and bring in more revenue so that we can meet some of the expenditure commitments that we have. We cannot run away from it. It may not be nice for us to hear it, but that is the truth. That's what we have to do.
Thank you for making it.
Thank you for having me,
Come
Thelma.
back soon. Don't wait 11 months.
Fatih will be coming, and I'll be coming as well.
I'm marking the calendar.
I'll be coming.
I hope to see you soon. The Honourable Minister for Information, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, representing the good people of Oppong, Ayurebi, who we are told don't have a district hospital. So they also want their own Agenda 111. Thank you for making time, and thank you for your messages as well. We'll keep the conversations ongoing, and in the next part of the show, there's more ahead with the Minerals Commission and Your World. Stay with us.